Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. A very warm welcome from Berlin. My name is Rachel Wilkinson. I am the Director of Programmes at the International Civil Society Centre. We have 30 minutes for a short session to just talk a little bit and to explore some insights and foresights from our misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation work. And discuss why this is important for CSOs. So thank you for joining today. We'll be going through a little bit of information around why we are working on mis and dis and malinformation and why we're taking a strategic foresight approach to this work. So the International Civil Society Centre, for those of you who aren't aware of us, we are a small organisation who works to support international civil society organisations. We aim to amplify and support civil society organisations to drive forward transformational change and to support international civil society organisations to reshape themselves in the current world that we find ourselves in. Our shareholders and our core supporters are maybe familiar to you. I can see a few of you on the participant list are members and shareholders, so very warm welcome. These are our shareholders and our core supporters. As you can see, for those who are visually minded, it's very big international CSOs who are working to support often the sustainable development goals and to help the communities that they work with. We're going to delve into futures thinking now. The International Civil Society Centre has worked for quite a few years on strategic foresight. And just to get a little grasp of who you all are and where you're all at with futures thinking, there is a very short Slido poll that I would encourage you all to log on to now. There's the QR code and there's also the link in the chat and there's the event code as well. So I'll give people a few minutes to get into that. So the first question on the Slido poll is, when do you think the future starts? We'll collate a little word cloud and see what people are thinking. When we think about the futures, what do we think? Today? Yesterday? Unevenly, that's a good one. In the past. Nobody's going for starts in 20 years' time. With technology. Okay. Wonderful. As we speak, with every word, at any moment. So we'll be talking today briefly around futures thinking, which is a set of methodologies. There's a couple of other questions that are coming up on the Slido now of who has come across strategic foresight methodologies before, to get a little gauge from the room. Okay, so quite even. Oh, wow, 50-50. Okay. So some of us, half of us, have come across strategic foresight before. The next question is, has anybody, and this I guess is for the 52% who've said yes, have you used any futures thinking in your work? Yes or no? Okay, great. This is very helpful for me to get a little background, and it's very, very nice to see that quite a lot of you have heard of strategic foresight, over half of you, and that of that half, most of you have actively used it. The International Civil Society Centre has been working on futures thinking for a while now, and we will be talking a little bit about why and the how, but I'm going to start with a few definitions for those of you who are very accustomed to this, just to make sure we're all on the same page. For those of you who it's completely new, hopefully this will help us as we spend the next 25 minutes together. So when we refer to futures thinking, we're referring to a systematic approach about future, exploring possible factors, what could give rise to possible and probable futures. So it's not looking into a crystal ball, it's not foresight, it's not us predicting and saying this will definitely happen. It's looking at different options and different factors that may arise to possible and probable futures. When we refer to foresight or strategic foresight at the centre, we are referring to the specific tools and the methodologies that are used to conduct futures work. But we refer to futures thinking as a bit more of a bigger, more inclusive element, which also includes future mindset, agile thinking, thinking through, going against groupthink, going the extra mile in our explorations of what's possible, and strategic foresight we use when we're talking about specific tools and methodologies. A trend map is just a very simple visual description of relevant trends and weak signals that we feel are influencing a particular topic. So we will be showing you later a little example of a trends map. Scenarios, this is the most common tool that is often used in strategic foresight, and the one that I would take a bet most people have used for those who have engaged in futures thinking. And that's simply a description of possible actions or events that could possibly happen in the future. Again, no crystal ball, not manifesting what will happen, but just to give some possible options. So that's to get us all on the page with futures thinking. So futures thinking, I've explained very briefly what it is, but why do we care about it at Civil Society Centre? Why does it matter to civil society organisations? Why are we having this conversation today? So strategic foresight has been used for a very, very long time. It originated in the military. Corporates took it on, most famously Shell Oil, are very big into strategic foresight and produce very wild and wonderful scenarios every year. The public sector as well, lots of local and national and regional governments have taken strategic foresight and used it, but it was sort of not being used and not much of a mainstay within civil society organisations. That's one of the reasons why the International Civil Society started working on strategic foresight. But why we think it matters specifically to civil society organisations is it just helps us to engage and think critically and creatively on complex issues. Most of us working in civil society organisations know that it's not simple. The challenges and the opportunities that we have are not straightforward. It's very complex, it's often very messy, there's lots of unknowns, there's lots of unknown unknowns, and strategic foresight and futures thinking is a way to help us expand our thinking and ensure that we are looking towards a positive and preferable outcome. It helps protect against groupthink. So I really like the Walter Lippmann quote of "when all think alike, no one is thinking." Strategic foresight is a really wonderful set of tools and methodologies that can really help bring in very diverse opinions and different approaches and different people's perspectives. And this is very helpful when we're trying to be inclusive and participatory in our work, and also when we're trying to find new ideas. So it's not just the loudest voice wins or the people who are sat around the governing table win. It's a chance to bring in lots of different voices and different opportunities. As we've mentioned before, it can provide positive visions of possible futures. And sometimes when we look around our climate and our ecosystems today, there's not necessarily always a lot of hope and a lot of positivity. And this is a way for us sometimes to kind of step out of the moment and to look up above at the big picture and look towards our future goals and our future aspirations. And future thinking is a very lovely set of methodologies to help with that. It can help us delve into some of these complexities. Things are often interdependent and they influence things, and it's not a straightforward A equals B. It helps us also create new narratives. So if we don't have positive new narratives, it's very hard for people to necessarily get round an aim or to get round an objective. So having new narratives helps our human brains imagine that as a reality. So that's some of the reasons why we feel that futures thinking matters to civil society organisations. I'd just like to also note now, scanning the horizon, give a little shout out and a plug to one of our communities at the International Civil Society Centre. Since 2015, we've had a group and a community of civil society actors who come together to look at Futures Thinking. We support one another in our own work and our own organisations, as well as doing combined and collective collaborative work together. It's a platform for peer exchange and learning from each other, as well as trying to help us embed some of these tools and some of these mindsets in our own organisations. And the Foresight resources that we will be showing today sprang from Scanning the Horizon. And a little insight into some of our learning. So the Centre, as I've mentioned, has been working on futures thinking since 2015. And we realised that civil society, we're really good at crisis response. When there's crisis, when we need to pivot, we're really good at doing that. And there's been lots of examples of us doing that all the time, obviously COVID being one. For those of us who are working in complex situations, having to change programming, having to work differently with advocacy, when funding, we're very good at responding to crisis and changing. And there was a gap, we realised, between people doing forecasting and responding to this crisis to the longer term thinking. Is it possible for us to be a little bit ahead of the game? So we feel that it's very important to complement what civil society generally is very good at from our research of responding, changing, being agile, to kind of do a little step further about being a bit more proactive about what's coming around the bend. So instead of us all on a ship rowing in the right direction, are we actually rowing in the right direction? Has the river changed its course, but we haven't seen because we've been firefighting and we've had our head stuck down on the day-to-day business of our programs and our work and our objectives. So Foresight gives us a chance to take pause, take a breath, to look up and also to look around. And then also, why mis and dis and malinformation? So we have decided to work and use our foresight on mis and dis and malinformation. But to start with, there's a little explainer video about mis and dis and malinformation.
In today's world, false information, whether it's misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation, spreads quickly and can undermine trust in civil society organisations. Misinformation is false information shared by mistake without the intent to cause harm. People believe what they are sharing is true, but it can lead to confusion and damage trust in communities. Disinformation is false information spread deliberately to deceive or manipulate. This can disrupt society, mislead public opinion, and harm the work of civil society organisations. Malinformation is true information used to cause harm, such as leaking personal data or framing facts to incite fear. Civil society organisations must verify, counter disinformation, and safeguard against attacks to protect their credibility and communities.
That's a short video explainer when we're talking about mis and dis and malinformation. I'd quickly like to invite people in the chat just to say yes or no of, does mis, dis and malinformation, does this affect your daily life? If you think yes, just type in a yes. If you think no or not sure, just type that in. Okay. I'd like to go a little step further and ask you to consider, does mis and dis and malinformation have a negative impact on your own work professionally? A yes, a no, I'm not sure. Seeing lots of yeses. I feel I could just go home now. So yes, we are working on this issue because it has a huge impact on civil society organisations. I think we all know that mis and dis and malinformation has huge effects on our society as a whole and our individual lives. We've seen that it has a negative impact in democracy recently with all these super elections that we're having. We've seen it has a negative impact on social cohesion. It really does divide communities and divide people. We've seen that it's also undermines social trust and trust of institutions, which also includes trust of civil society organisations. We have seen from our shareholders and our core supporters how misinformation can impede on their own work with programme delivery, with advocacy, with campaigning, with lobbying. We've seen that CSOs have been targeted with disinformation attacks, which has a huge adverse effect on their reputation, on potential funds, long ramifications of that. And we've also sadly seen malinformation attacks happening on staff members and colleagues based in our shareholder and in the wider CSO network. This is why we decided to focus on mis and disinformation, and we decided to do a foresight approach on it. As I mentioned before, the reasons why foresight is really great is it allows us to be flexible and agile. It allows us to not firefight the how do we get over this disinformation attack now, or how do we ensure that this information is verified and fact-checked, but what's coming next, what's coming around the corner, how can civil society organisations be prepared for what may be coming next within this information landscape. It also helps us explore what could be positive, what could we do, how could we influence, what initiatives could we start and intervene with that would promote a healthy information ecosystem and engage and promote trust of civil society organisations. Can also help us by actively engaging on this issue while thinking about a long-term solution. So I think often when we talk about mis and dis and malinformation, we're drawn to either the macro level of what's happening in national elections or what's happening on social media with various trends, or we're drawn to a very individual focus of what has my auntie posted on our WhatsApp group last week, but to focus it specifically on how is this affecting our work for civil society organisations. Generally, strategic foresight and futures thinking, it helps us and it enables us to help make better decisions today about tomorrow. With more information, with more input, with taking different approaches, we can be more creative and more innovative in the decisions and the impacts that we make today and the strategies that we put in place for our work. And next slide is around our trends map. So from our Scanning the Horizon community, along with engaging with other stakeholders from civil society organisations, we got people together with interactive workshops, with discussions and one-to-one meetings to ask what weak signals are we seeing around disinformation, misinformation and malinformation. What things are we seeing coming up that has an effect on civil society as a whole, whether this was good, bad, unsure, whether this was happening now, maybe this was a sort of slight weak signal of I saw this happening. I think it could definitely be utilised for disinformation in the future. And we did a very simple PEST analysis of political, economical, social and technological. We kept it quite simple, partly because it was quite a new theme for us to work on, and we brought in aspects of legal and environmental with a pestle as well. But for our trends map, which again is a visualization, we pared it down and we made it much more simpler. And the aim was that we could just show some interesting aspects and issues that we've come across within our work on mis and dis and malinformation affecting civil society organisations, and to raise awareness a little bit and to provoke some questions for the wider audience. So I'm going to quickly go through a couple of aspects. So in our political trend, and you can see this beautiful trends map that we've done. So the blue is the positive aspects, the kind of orangey red is the negative aspects, and the purple is this is neutral or we're actually not sure. And as we go up from the P to the L, this is what we think would happen more into the future. So everything down at the bottom is things that we are seeing very much happening now and has consequences and impacts for the ecosystem of information and what we're seeing in the future. As you can see, the kind of more positive ones were the ones that we thought would maybe happen possibly in the future, and we were seeing a lot of negative aspects in the bottom of what we were seeing now. On the next one with the economical, we had a lot less. This probably also speaks to who we had doing our futures thinking. Participation and getting diverse approaches is a big aspect of the strategic foresight that we follow. We were, however, in our civil society organisation bubble, where potentially economical aspects were not top of people's minds. But here we saw things like successful libel cases against news networks where they intentionally or they didn't do enough to check for fake information and misinformation and disinformation being posted, through to the impact that paywalls would have on the general civil society and general citizens who aren't able to freely access verified and trusted sources of information. The next trend was societal trends. And again, maybe here's our little bias of civil society organizations, that we came up with a lot of trends. We came up with lots that were just really, we were just a bit unsure. There's lots of aspects that it could be for the good, it could be a little bit difficult. So with trust, shift of trust, so people not trusting formal institutions, leaning more into their peers. This, in lots of contexts, could be quite negative of, trusted, strong democratic institutions not being trusted. In more restrictive spaces, where there's a big push of giving disinformation, of promoting propaganda, having that shift of trust could be beneficial. So there's lots of these trends and lots of these signals that we're seeing where it's actually unsure what the impact would be. And just to say, within this visualization of our trends map, it is very much a simplified version. A lot of these trends interlink with other aspects. The next one we go to is technological. Obviously, every single one of our mis and dis and malinformation have an aspect of technological impact. So they could all fit in, and there's lots of connecting lines. But the aim of this trends map is just to illustrate and to show a few different examples of what is happening now and what could be happening. Overall, our main learning, our top 3 kind of learnings that came from this trends map, was around the AI-driven content that we've seen recently, the kind of huge uptake, and that varies from just very bad quality AI-generated misinformation that's very easy to spot, right through to very, very difficult to see deep fakes that look incredibly real. All levels of AI content being used within this information ecosystem. Also, AI being blamed for information that's actually true. So we saw a lot in different elections that when WhatsApp voice memos were leaked, people would straight away, politicians go, no, that's fake. That's a deep fake. That's not my voice. When in actual fact it was. So AI-driven content, for good and bad, when it's real and when it's not even real, has been used to pollute and to kind of make more murky the information landscape that we're seeing. A huge theme that we saw coming across in all of these was the erosion of trust. That was the erosion of trust in public institutions, from governments through to mainstream media, through to civil society organizations and the work that we do. And we also saw a third theme coming through very strongly on social media and the rise in opinion engineering. And that again came through lots of different ways. There's been recently an increase in paid influencers promoting mis and disinformation. Oftentimes, these influencers are not even aware that it is misinformation. They have just been offered a partnership, a paid partnership to promote something, and it's come through different areas, and they're not aware that it's not true, and they're unwittingly spreading false information to their very loyal followers who are very open to hearing from them. Also, the rise in people using different platforms. So leaving various social media platforms, going to a specific one because that has a specific ideology. That's where they get their shared information. That's where they feel they get their trusted information. And we've really seen a role of social media being at the forefront of engineering different people's opinions. There's obviously the challenges around that, around moderation and regulation too. So this was our trends map. From our trends map, we moved to make some scenarios. So as I mentioned before, scenarios is what people are mostly very comfortable and have seen before. And their stories, they're very short stories that explore possible futures. So we developed some scenarios on mis and dis and malinformation based on the trends map that I've just shown to you. All of these resources have been shared in the chat. We will be sharing them at a later stage as well on our app platform for Global Perspectives, as well as through social media platforms later on to roll this out across the sector. So we took our trends map and we looked at the key trends that we saw. Should just go back one. And we presented different possible futures. We used a 2x2 matrix where we took two drivers for change. The first driver was regulation, whether that was strong or whether that was weak. The second driver was engagement of civil society organizations, again, strong and weak. And we came up with 4 different scenarios. Ranging from low engagement with low CSO engagement, which was quite dystopic, I would say, right through to when there's high regulation across the world, it's very ambitious, and high CSO engagement, what does that look like? And these scenarios, they are there to just promote and prompt questions. The idea is that we can use these, and CSOs can use these scenarios to think through what implications would these scenarios have for our own work? What could we do to influence or to negate these risks or opportunities from happening? And to decide how would these scenarios, would they enable our work or would they restrict our work? So it's just a way, storytelling is very powerful. And we mentioned before how strategic foresight is key in around changing the narrative. So looking at future scenarios that go into very different areas, it allows us as civil society organizations to think through what could possible futures be? How could this big, huge issue of polluted information affect our day-to-day work? Future scenarios are often used to test and to stress test strategies in organizations. It's very known, it's quite proven. There are other ways for future scenarios to be used for civil society organizations and for anybody to help promote ideas, to help generate what could be preferable or possible. How can it expand our thinking on issues? Taking in different approaches can be really, really worthwhile. I would encourage everybody to take a look at these resources. Do come back to us if you have any questions. We'll be kind of showing our learnings and our insights from now onwards over the next few months, rolling it out via social media. We have lots of convening and collaboration events at the centre where we often talk about strategic foresight and how futures thinking can help. The aim of this session was just to promote this important issue of mis and dis and malinformation, and what do we as civil society need to be aware of? How can we be proactive? How can we be forward thinking in our approaches to make sure that we can respond to the barrage of polluted information that we are getting? That was a quick run through of some of our work on this issue. Please do reach out to us in the future, and we would be really willing and able and love to hear your thoughts and your personal experience as well on this issue and what you're doing.